Keldric Faulk is the best player that no one's talking about.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're dapping it up with Darrell Dapprich, the Montgomery radio legend, hanging out with us. Want to thank you for making Locked On Auburn your first listen. To all the everydayers out there, and of course, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Darrell, we're going to talk about several guys that are flying under the radar that guys aren't talking about. And to lead things off, Keldric Faulk is the best player that nobody's talking about. I love the excitement for Keion Crawford. I love the excitement for Phillip Bleedy. I love the excitement for Jalen McLeod coming back and being a part of a really electric pass rushing tandem. But anytime you talk about the pass rush, you being the general you, Auburn folks, Keldric Faulk, he's being left out of it. They love the tandem of McLeod and Crawford. But the real tandem involves whoever is opposite of Keldric Faulk. So to me, Keldric Faulk's the best player nobody's talking about right now in Auburn's camp.
Yeah, very strange when you've got a player that has had so much exposure getting taken to SEC media days, that his own coach just raves about, has said nothing but positive things. Then you get back to fall camp after a couple-week break, and it's just, like you said, under the radar. And, you know, from everything that I've heard, he's playing really well in fall camp. He's a leader. But for whatever reason, the focus is going away from him and other people. And it's a head-scratcher because, look, let's be honest. We talk about all these flips, and we get excited about potential flips. And Keldric Faulk last year, when he flipped from Florida State, was immediately ordained the next one on the defensive line, right?
Yeah,
Somebody
right.
that was going to be there and make an impact. And he made a slight impact as a freshman, but I think you believed and I believed that he was going to make a significant leap from freshman year to sophomore year. How does someone like that just stay under the radar? It blows my mind.
Yeah, I guess it's just the assumed, hey, he's going to be really solid for us, and he's not the new guy anymore. I guess that's what it is. But I mean, more folks are talking about Amaris Williams, his backup right now. Mm-hmm. We're probably guilty of that too, just because it's new. It's the new shiny thing in the room. But like Keldric Faulk is, if Auburn overachieves this year, Keldric is a huge reason why. And that's why Coach Freeze, I assume, took him with him to SEC media days. It's just so funny because Crawford, and I think Crawford's worthy of it, don't get me wrong, but just how they talk about the pass rushing tandem of Crawford and McLeod, when in reality, I think the pass rushing tandem on most downs, maybe not third and long, but on most downs, especially early downs, the tandem is Keldric and McLeod.
Yes.
I think. And so to me, I almost think as a fan base and as a media group, we're almost focusing too much on the two bucks when it's really like your defensive end and your buck that are going to kind of be the bookends on most downs.
It's like that old adage where the person that you just expect it to be, you take for granted that, okay, he's going to, he's a good player. Right. So like you said, look, in business, it's leaving your existing customer base to go find that new customer and focus on that new customer. That's kind of what this is happening from an athletic standpoint, is that he's just a given. It's something you expect that you're counting on. So you start looking at the shiny new toys. I'm with you. I think Keion Crawford comes off the bench. I see him backing up McLeod or Faulk in certain situations. I think your bookends are Faulk and McLeod, and I think that they will wreak havoc. And I think people are, if they're not talking about Faulk, that's great. Let him go under the radar, because I think he's definitely going to be somebody that's going to make some noise. And it's shocking to me, especially since he got taken to Dallas. Especially
because of that, the media days thing, for sure. But what a great situation to be in, for sure. All right, your number one kind of forgotten guy who's flying under the radar, people aren't talking about, is also a defensive standout.
It is. I believe that, at the end of the day, Keionte Scott is somebody that, I don't know, I feel like so many people talk about Keionte Lee and talk about, now we're hearing all this JC Hart buzz and the safeties. that Keionte Scott is the same. He's your known commodity that's over there, and you just leave it. You wind him up and you let him go and you leave him alone. And I think what's great about him is if Keon Lee keeps getting a lot of the attention and keeps being the buzz in camp, he'll be under the radar to make some plays. And if they want to go ahead and stay away from Keon Lee, if they get scouting reports because of the buzz and they want to keep throwing to Scott's side, do it, because I think he's a natural playmaker. I'm very interested to see how he plays on the outside. But he's a guy that just doesn't get – I mean, he's not on any watch lists or anything like that. I'm surprised by that. I think he's going to have a really good year.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And, I'm a Keon Lee truther through and through. I can't get enough of the young corner. But Keionte Scott, to me, there is some of this where I want to see him excel at the SEC level at outside corner. I want to see it. I want to see it. He should do it. But to me, I am a little surprised, and I agree with you. I'm a little surprised at him being the outside corner because it was a big storyline in spring. We talked about it almost every day. And that conversation is kind of fizzled out going into fall camp. And you're right. I mean, it's been all about Keon Lee and it's been all about JC Hart. I mean, I've heard Antonio Kite's name more than Keionte Scott just because of folks are asking about Kite, saying, okay, can he crack the two deep? What does that look like? Jay Crawford is a name I've heard a ton about, the talented freshman corner. I think I've said all of those guys' names this fall. Think more than Keionte Scott. And so, yeah, I think you nailed this one.
And I think that it's interesting. This is a guy that's making a slight position change. I get it. He's still playing a defensive back role. He's not moving from safety to corner, but he's moving from inside to outside. And with that comes an adjustment. And I don't think that the bowl game gave a stellar representation of what he can become as an outside corner. That was the first time we got to see it. It didn't look all that great. I think with a fall camp and a spring camp under his belt, I think he's going to open some eyes. But, yeah, when you're talking about a guy making a slight position change and still not, maybe he's just a fixture. Maybe it's just like, look, we ain't got to worry about him. We know what we have with him. Let's focus on the two deep and some of the newcomers.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, playing outside corner is easier in the sense of, you have less ground to cover than you do when you're inside because, spoiler, if you're in the middle of the field, you can go left and right. If you're on the outside, you can really only go inside because you can use the sideline to help you to your advantage. And so there will be some of that adjustment, but physically, you typically go up against larger receivers on the outside. And so from a physical matchup point of view, Keonte is going to have his hands full. He's going to be going up against larger options, but it's not like he didn't cover tight ends a year ago from time to time as an inside corner. So he should be fine, and I'm excited to see it. But yeah, so far, Keldric Faulk, the defensive end, and Keionte Scott, the corner, kind of nobody's talking about him. The next two guys we're going to talk about are offensive playmakers waiting to happen. Nobody's talking about them, Darrell. We'll tell you who they are in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Darrell, can you imagine buying tickets anywhere other than our friends at Game Time? No, sir.
No. I mean, lightning deals, everything right at the tips of your fingers. You can look at events like plays and concerts and sporting events, even things like Disney on Ice. I saw there's options that you can go to. It's right there at your fingertips. One-stop shop.
Yep. And Darrell is a true man of culture. So if you're talking about events, Darrell goes to all of them. No, they've got priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off of buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, the theater, and more. Flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing. I love that you could toggle that feature on to show the total up front so you get no surprise fees at checkout. And of course, they've got the lowest price guarantee. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Darrell, I'm going to throw out a name, and you may push back a little bit because there has been some conversation, but I'm going to make the argument there hasn't been enough conversation. Rivaldo, Fairweather. There's been so much talk about all these receivers, rightfully so. The new additions of Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Bryce Kane and what Malcolm Simmons did this past weekend. And then obviously the transfer additions of Robert Lewis and Keandre Lambert-Smith. There's a ton of excitement about all of these pass catchers. But let's don't forget Auburn's leading receiver a year ago. And it was Rivaldo Fairweather.
And I had him in my mind to talk about, especially because Hugh Freeze made a very strong point at SEC Media Days that he was another guy that was flying under the radar. But where I'll push back a little bit and where I changed my mind is because he was off my radar until he appeared on the John Mackey watch list as the best tight end in the country. It's hard to sleep on somebody or come under the radar when the national media says you're on a watch list for being the best tight end in the country.
I'm just saying around here, like, he's not being discussed. Yep. I mean, you almost have to add him after you're done talking about all the receivers, but they treated him like a receiver a year ago. I kind of think they'll do it again this year just because he's too good not to. And also Auburn has a lot of tight ends that they're probably going to want 2 tight ends on the field. We've seen them rotate into that in our short viewing window so far this fall camp. So to me, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for him. Does he lead Auburn in receiving this year like he did last year? I would have to, my guess is no. My guess is he does not, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he did lead Auburn with like 42 catches or something like that next year.
I want to say something that might kind of startle you a little bit, or if he does, if he leads Auburn in receiving this year, I don't like Auburn's chances of the passing game evolving to what it needs to be. I don't think it's good for Auburn if Rivaldo Fairweather leads Auburn. Now, we can talk about, is it total number of receptions or is it yards? But either way, it better be a receiver. I don't care if it's slot or outside. For Auburn and Peyton Thorne's passing game to be where it needs to be, I don't think it's good news if Fairweather's your leading receiver again.
Who leads Auburn in receiving this year, if you had to guess? Go with catches and yards.
Keandre Lambert-Smith.
Both?
Yes.
Catches and yards? Wow.
Yes, but I'm going to give Coleman the nod and touchdowns. Yeah.
I'll go Coleman for yards. I'm going Robert Lewis for receptions.
And then Robert Lewis is going to be like second in both, in my opinion. Like I think he'll be second in receptions, second in yards. So it'll be just kind of interesting the way that. But I love that we're debating this. I mean, when was there an opportunity to debate choices in receptions, yards, and touchdowns with receivers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Rivaldo Fairweather is flying under the radar a little bit. I almost put Robert Lewis as well. For a similar reason, but I went with Rivaldo. Who is your offensive standout that people aren't talking about enough?
Well, I've had a little self-reflection on this one, and it's Damari Alston. And I'm the world's it's looking in the mirror and saying,
it's your fault.
It's my fault. I'm looking at me. I'm looking introspectively and saying, you idiot, you're one of the people that's sleeping on him. And I am. But I've always said praising one running back wasn't meant to downplay another. I think that Alston is a really, really good running back. And I think he's going to have a really good year. And I think he's getting lost in the Hunter Cobb hype. So he is such a good player, and physically, you and others have said he's transformed his body a little bit in the offseason, and he is. And I'm one of the ones that are guilty. I'm an idiot that I'm not giving him as much praise as I should. So I'm coming clean. He's one that I think is a little too quiet, and he's going to show some folks, what exactly. I just feel that he's. And again, it's not that somebody else will not go to the level. I just think he really is flying under the radar for someone who I think is going to have a good year.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. Maybe I don't feel like he's flying under the radar because I talked him up so much that first week of fall camp because I thought he looked so good. So maybe that's why I don't feel like that. But I will say, like, to your point, I've gone on a few national shows that just talk about college football, as a whole, and folks can't stop talking about Jarquez Hunter, and then it kind of stops after that. In fact, later today, I'm dropping a show with Jay Smith, one of the hosts of Locked On Sooners. And he's like, one of my biggest concerns for the Oklahoma side of this is Jarquez Hunter. And it's like, well,
they have concerns. Really? I didn't think they had any concerns at all. I didn't think they were worried about that game at all. Let me say this, too, about Alston. Go back and watch the Iron Bowl last year.
Yeah.
And some of the really big key runs against Alabama that led to scores and changed momentum and flipped field position, all that. 22 was toting. Now it'll be 0 this year, but 22 was toting the rock.
Nope. I love that. That's a great point. Yeah. All right. So on the defensive standouts, we've got Keldric Faulk and Keionte Scott that are flying under the radar. People aren't talking about them. I got Rivaldo Fairweather, and you got Damari Alston as far as offensive skill positions. But there's also some offensive linemen that I think are flying under the radar. Which offensive linemen should we be talking about more? We tell you in just a second, right here on Locked On Auburn. When you look at the O-line, you hear really just one name. Is what I'm hearing over and over and over again. And it's Connor Lew. And boy, does he deserve it, Darrell. Boy, does he deserve it. I've got no issue with it. And just by the nature of offensive linemen, like, you don't really want to hear much about the O-line, especially once the season starts, because normally it's tied to somebody giving up sacks or a holding call or somebody missing a key block. And so these offensive linemen are fine with their names not being touted during the season, but I think everybody wants a little praise in the offseason when it's hot and you're working your tail off to get better. Percy Lewis was such a big deal in the spring. They rolled him out in the first media availability in the spring, and they really kind of made him a focal point. And then ever since then, it's just kind of trickled out a little bit. And I think Percy Lewis is one of the most overlooked cornerstones of this offense. I mean, there's so much certainty with a lot of the roster, and like left tackle is locked down because of Percy Lewis, because of the massive offensive tackle transfer from Mississippi State. So to me, I think Percy Lewis is flying under the radar, which is sort of normal for offensive linemen. And there's just this assumption that Auburn's offensive line is going to get better from a year ago. The assumption is because of Connor Lew, which is we just mentioned, and Percy Lewis. Like that's why. Everything else is the same. Like, you scoot some guys in that you're going to talk about in a second. The right side of the line is the same with Jeremiah Wright and Xavier Miller. So to me, I think Percy Lewis deserves more praise and discussion than he's currently getting. But when you're steady every single day at that left tackle spot, I mean, it is kind of boring. So I understand why people aren't talking about Percy Lewis, but we should be talking about Percy Lewis.
I've had some people that have covered Auburn for a very long time that feel very, very strongly that he was the biggest transfer portal get for Auburn in the offseason. That more than the receivers, anything else, that Percy Lewis. And then I had the opportunity to talk to a former offensive lineman at Auburn that was at the scrimmage. And he shared with me, he said, the dude's a second-round pick. He said, like Braden, and he said the same thing about Braden Smith, by the way, years ago.
There you go.
He's that high on him. He says, I don't understand why nobody is raving about him, including the people that put stuff on the preseason all SEC teams and that kind of thing, the media that got to vote. He thinks he's a potential first team all SEC tackle.
Yeah.
And for that kind of praise, and he's not the only one that said that, he would know. He played in the league or played in the conference. I don't understand why there's not more buzz about him. Again, I think he's one of the most important transfer portal additions that Auburn got in the offseason.
Yeah, I think it's crucial. And it changes the personnel in your offensive front. We'll talk about, who was most impacted by that in a second. But to me, I mean, you look at the folks that are talking the way they are about Percy Lewis. I mean, you mentioned former players that stand out to him. I mean, I've talked to several of his teammates, off the record that absolutely adore what he's brought to the team on the field. But then, I think it was you that did a show with me after Jim Nagy put out the comments and said what he said about, and of course, Jim Nagy's over the Senior Bowl. And so saying this is a guy that the NFL is going to want, and it lines up with the former player friend that you just discussed. So to me, this is a no-brainer. I mean, Auburn added a potential second-round caliber NFL offensive tackle. And it's for some reason, that got boring. And I just think that is crazy when you really put it in that context.
And look at his PFF grade. Why Nagy and some of those guys are so high on him and has already talked about him for the Senior Bowl, and the season hasn't even started yet, is because what the NFL looks at left tackles is your PFA pass pro grade, and his is off the stinking charts. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just and I still think he's a good run blocker. We'll see that. I mean, but his is off the charts, and it's a position that is so crucial for Peyton Thorne to quit with the skittish feet and all that kind of stuff. You got Lewis there to lock it down, and you know that he's got you and got your blind side protection. Step him in the pocket, make a throw. It's crucial. And again, pass pro is the big. I'm never worried about Auburn's pass about their run blocking. We've seen that even in the lean years.
Sure,
but I mean, we want to give Thorne time and let the receivers get separation downfield. This is the dude that is so crucial for that. And others, not just Auburn homers like us, are pointing it out. And so why is it that national guys, and Nagy can say it, but locally Auburn just crickets? Mm-hmm. Kind of strange, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, they may love
familiarity might breed a little bit of negligence there. Who knows? Yeah,
who knows? Nagy was also the one who called Marcus Harris very early on when he was up here kind of scouting for the Senior Bowl. So take that for what it's worth. I think another element to this, while we're talking about tackles, because we're going to go interior in a second, but the battles that are happening every day between Percy Lewis and Xavier Miller and Keldric Faulk and Jalen McLeod / Kieran Crawford, I mean, that's got to make these guys better every single day. I mean, when has Auburn had competitions like that every single day?
No, that's a great point, because I don't think it was always imbalanced. I mean, I was pretty confident about Derek Brown and Marlon Davison and some, Derek Hall, but what kind of offensive linemen were they competing against every day in practice? I mean, that's the issue. Now you've got stud on stud, and I think that's going to be very beneficial when you get into your conference schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be huge. And so I think that's kind of an underrated element in all of this. And so I just wanted to point that out. Who is your last name, your offensive lineman that deserves more conversation?
Dillon Wade. And I think it's because the guy played tackle last year and is now probably playing his more natural, more preferred, strongest position at guard. So you move him to guard and you make the guard position better. Yep. He's probably more comfortable there. And, oh, by the way, probably a guy that'll hear his name called in April in the NFL draft by switching to guard because of it being a more natural selection for him inside. Crickets on him. I mean, and again, he's getting asked to move from one position to another, which, as we've talked about numerous times, Zach, actually strengthens two positions.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Dillon Wade, he could have very easily been upset by that move and say, well, no, I want to be an offensive tackle. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he talked to folks in the league or what it was that made him want to stay, but it sounds like he ended up being excited about the move. And if I'm him and I know that they brought in a guy to help me slide inside, and so there's a guy to my left that's going to be looked at by every NFL team over the course of the year, well, they're probably going to look at me too, because they're right next to each other. I think it's going to help him a ton.
And it was explained to me like this, that NFL scouts and evaluators could go to Dillon Wade and may have gone to Dillon Wade, I don't know, but this is how the scenario plays out, and say, son, you can stay at tackle and try to get into the league as an undrafted free agent, or you can slide inside and play guard and hear your name called on draft day. It makes it an easy decision when you hear it that way.
I think there's a real chance there's 4 draft picks on Auburn's offensive line next year.
Yeah. And
Percy, Dillon, Connor Lew, not this year, but next year he'll get drafted.
Right.
And then I think Xavier Miller gets drafted. Yeah. Whether it's this year or next year, we'll see. But
yeah. And the one that was the most solid, allegedly coming back last year, that everyone felt the most about from an experience standpoint, was Jeremiah Wright, because everybody thought he was the road grader. Cole Kublik talked about him being nasty and being, a downhill guy that just destroys you. I mean, 2 years ago, he was the best run blocker Auburn had. A guy that played defensive line too, now that he's settling in. So, man, that just bodes well. And then you got some depth too.
Are we booging right now? Are we booging?
Yeah, I'm booging.
I love that.
I am, and we have some depth. Auburn has some depth too. God forbid something happens, or you want to, injury, nicked up, whatever. There are depth options now.
Yeah, I mean, you feel good about Tyler Johnson,
Muskrat,
Seth Wilfred. I mean, yeah, the depth.
Who's and the other transfer? Ronan Chambers.
Ronan Chambers.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So great
Look,
spot.
I'm just gonna say the four names you just said, and I know this is maybe I'm booging way too much. I got to drop the level of boog.
No, don't drop it.
The four names you just said, is it too much out on a limb to say 3 years ago I'd have taken them all day and on Sunday to be the starting offensive line?
Oh, the backup guys?
Yeah. I'd have been excited if those guys were under a Gus Malzahn led offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Gus ever had a tackle that was as good as what Tyler Johnson should be.
Yeah, that's true. Because he was
after Greg Robinson.
Well, but Greg Robinson was that Chiswick or Malzahn?
Malzahn probably recruited him as an OC and then left and then came back.
Yeah.
That's when people actually stay to their school for a few years.
I get it though. It's very, very encouraging to look forward to. And you combine other aspects of the skill positions too. And I'm going to allow myself to bug.
You're allowed to bug. Happy Wednesday. Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on X, Dap6410, Instagram, Darrell Dap. And you can catch me Wednesdays and Fridays here with you. And then the Barn, the new community that we're just loving being a part of with everybody and all the subscribers that have signed up.
Yep, that's thebarnauburn.com. Go sign up. It's $1 for the first month. It's very fun. Very fun. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.